This is an honor for our friends in the translation. I will speak slowly. I am originally from New York City, and of course, New Yorkers can speak very fast. I won't do that today. This has been a very interesting year because 1 year in June, we had the honor of having our International Standards Organization TC20 SC16 plenary back in Seoul. So I get to come back after 1 year and to enjoy good friends and good food for a short period of time. I thought as I came on the airplane yesterday, the many hours from Washington to Haneda in Japan and then to Seoul, about my comments today. And I made a little change. 2 weeks ago, I was in Amsterdam in the Netherlands. It was an anniversary for me because 60 years ago, in 1964, I was a young man with a different color hair, and I was in Europe, in Amsterdam. And what I was thinking about on my flight here was, what has changed in aviation in 60 years? What has changed? What's the difference? Well, kind of interesting. In 1964, when I flew to Europe, it was on a Boeing 707 aircraft. Not that much different from today's aircraft, safer today, of course, but flying at 35,000 feet, flying at 500 miles per hour, using an instrument landing system. That's important for my comments today, my friends. Instrument landing systems being developed in 1929 by a guy named Jimmy Doolittle, and we still use that today as the main precision landing system at every major airport in the world. Why? I'll tell you about that in 2 or 3 minutes here. Because there are other ways that we need to talk about that have been in development now, like ground-based sense and avoid systems, GBAS systems for navigation, required navigation performance that is going to be needed because we have a revolution happening now in the change that's occurring in global aviation. In 1964, we had the jet engine, we had radar, and then, of course, shortly after, we had global position satellite reckoning for navigation. 3 activities that changed forever how we do aviation. They need to be advanced now to what is happening in global aviation, especially with the addition of advanced air mobility. There is an advent of change now that is occurring, and we need to look at what are the activities or what are the uses of airspace and navigation and surveillance and communication that are still being used today that have the roots, their ancestry back to 1945, 1950, and we need to identify that now. I say that the infrastructure, and just not me, infrastructure is one of the key issues that needs to be looked at in a very, very profound way. I intend to be provocative with some of my comments today. I just met Mitchell from Skyports. Skyports is doing an outstanding job globally as far as the vertiports and vertiplexes. There's a company in the United States called OneSky looking at traffic management. I know they had been to the Republic of Korea. They, like other companies, are doing a very good job. I'm doing work in the city of Houma, Louisiana, which is the largest helicopter operation in the United States, maybe the world, that is establishing a Gulf of Mexico center of excellence, not just for the water, but also then for the activities that will take place from Texas to Florida, which now can be used as potential sustainability and scalability in parts of the United States, like the New York area along the Northeast Corridor and in the California area. Let's see if I can make this go. I may just leave this chart up as my comments, because this is what we're about. It's a global issue. In addition to being part of the ISO SC16 committee, I am also part of the United States delegation to the International Civil Aviation Organization, RPAS panel, the AAM study group at ICAO, and I'm also honored to be the chair of the industry stakeholder body of the Joint Authorities and Regulations, JARIS, for unmanned aircraft. But I want to stay focused on the infrastructure. And the key issue of infrastructure that is the most, that I believe is not known well, is go the right way, is what the infrastructure will be looking like for the rush now that we have, I don't know how this translates in Korean, but leapfrogging, meaning that what started as unmanned aircraft delivering packages at low altitudes is now an echo, is now being overcome by the demands of advanced air mobility, electric vertical takeoff and landing aircraft, becoming highly automated. What is this going to do now for the airspace that I'll get to in the next slide? This is a very interesting picture that I have liberally borrowed, showing on Broadway in New York City in 1900, and you can see the circle on the left picture of one car. The rest were horses and buggies. And then just a short time later, 13 years later, you only see one horse with all the cars. This is going to be the change and challenge we have as far as the demand, not only for the transportation situation that takes place in large metropolitan areas. Seoul is a great example of great progress being made as far as in advanced air mobility by the Incheon Metropolitan City Advanced Air Mobility concept. And again, Mitchell, I'm sure that you're part of that activity, which is important because we're going to be mixing vertiports, vertiplexes, multiple vertiports in complex airspace. Airspace that looks like this. This is a global view of the flight information regions around the world. It hasn't changed since the 1950s. It's still the same. We still use airspace in the same methods, the same way, developing sectors for air traffic controllers as we did in 1950. I tell you, my friends, that today's airspace is like a 1950s car, and we're trying to put the bells and whistles of a 2024 car into that airspace. And with the advent of advanced air mobility and the demand that will be for electric vertical takeoff and landing aircraft that will be highly automated, we have to do something different. Something different has to happen for comm, navigation, and surveillance. A further example of the complexity of airspace, this is a great picture of the United States. These are all the sectors, both high and low, that air traffic controllers have to operate the traffic that's in and out of the United States. Now, I know there have been advances made in how we do air traffic control, but the concept of the airspace design is the same as it was in 1950. I can put a 1950 chart up here and it would be probably identical. So I give you this example then. Same as in Seoul, same as in New York, same as in Frankfurt, same as in London. When we start to look at vertiports, interfacing not only with the airports, but in the support of our citizens, and just not in a small area, but a large area, how do we do that? What are going to be the separation criteria minimum? Today, as it was when I started as an air traffic controller in 1965, 3-mile separation, 1,000 feet. Is that going to allow the kind of operations we need at vertiports in and around complex airspace? No. I read with great interest the concept of operations for Icheon, and one thing that I saw, because my dear friends at MITRE CASD were part of that activity, Michael Gutierrez and others, is and this is not anything other than a comment meant to be, not a criticism. Getting to what needs to be done by changing the separation criteria, changing how operations go into airspace we'll get to it. We're going to operate in the same procedures as we do today. And that's going to be a challenge, my friends, because that means 1,000 feet or 3-mile separation going into vertiports, and the sustainability will not be there. The return on the investment will not be there. So where then are the champions to make the changes that need to occur for these kinds of changes? Well, one place is ICAO, the International Civil Aviation Organization. As part of the RPAS panel over the last 8 years, and the Republic of Korea has a delegation that's been part of this activity for a long while, we have developed over 8 years recommended changes to the procedures and practices for detect and avoid and command and control and required link performance. The Air Navigation Commission that's in place right now has questions. They have a lot of questions, which is their job. However, the implementation date for 2026 will now go to 2028 and maybe 2030. So we keep moving to the right when we need to have answers in the near term. In Astana, Kazakhstan today, there is a meeting of the JARIS, the Joint Aviation Regulators Group. The industry group, which I represent, has put forth a concept of operation for future airspace use. What is the interface between the regulator and the air navigation service provider? These are the kinds of conversations that we need to have now. I used to live in New York City, as I said, and at one point I was the air traffic division manager. I have responsibility for the entire Northeast of the United States. And when I think in New York, like in Seoul, the amount of air traffic every day that's going into Icheon and going into Gimpo, as going into Newark, LaGuardia, Kennedy airports, it's a lot of airplanes, 15,000 feet and below. Now, with vertiports, I'm going to look at Mitchell now to see if he smiles or not. We're going to put a similar volume of traffic, but below 4,000 feet within a shorter circumference. How do we do that and get the return on the investment? This is the key thing for manufacturers. This is a key thing now for how we're going to start to shrink the volume of airspace that every airplane has to use, so that we could do more with what will be for eVTOL. And to do that, and here is the provocative piece. This is one of those things, not that it's a secret. What is the impact on current legacy aircraft? What's going to be the bottom line when, I'll take Seoul, that if every aircraft operating commercial is now told that starting 2024, there has to be an addition into the cockpit, to the flight management system, of required navigation performance. And that's globally. What is the fiscal responsibility then for the airlines to pay for that? What's the impact and cost to military to equip for required navigation performance? What's the impact to business operators, jets? What's general aviation? It's one thing in an audience like this to have a conversation about advanced air mobility, of what the future is going to be. The impact is to everybody. How do we get everybody involved of what is going to be the necessary steps incrementally over this, say, a 10-year period for equipage? And the equipage is going to be important for all. It's kind of interesting, and I never met Jeff Bezos, nor never will, I am sure, who had a great opportunity to put forth an idea, I don't know, 10 years ago about delivering packages in not only the United States, but globally. Hasn't happened yet. It hasn't happened because we haven't had a real serious conversation on what the safety criteria, the real security criteria, the whole thing about counter UAS now, at least I know in the United States, has taken over the conversation because of the potential of what may happen. The impact, though, the real impact is going to be the transformation of the infrastructure of how I started my conversation today with you on the airspace. I have said this with a smile on my face. The airspace concept that's used now globally needs to go into a museum. It's something of the past. We need a whole new way of looking for all operations in all airspace. I cannot stress strong enough, and I'm 78 years old, so I only have a couple more years of doing this before I find my rocking chair to sit somewhere in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, where I live, is we need to have a serious conversation on the equipage and the separation criteria for all. What is going to be the role of artificial intelligence? Highly automated, it's great to say highly automated, but what is going to be the advent, the beginning of how artificial intelligence will be brought into play, and who's going to certify that? What's going to be the certification criteria, the standards developed by ICAO? And right now, my friends at ICAO are having a hard time just to get the initial work package that's been in progress for 8 years to go forward. If I had my way, and there was an opportunity, even, and I'm thinking at ICAO, Michelle Merkel is the head of the Air Navigation Bureau, to really have a serious conversation globally about how the ICAO operation can bring standards and recommended practices to a fast track. So we will see. I do want to mention a few words about our International Standard Organization TC20 SC16 committee. Dr. Chang is sitting right down here in the front, my dear friend, who leads our testing and evaluation of equipment. As you can see, there is a leadership population in the ISO committee, which is rare among standards organizations, and that's the inclusion from Pacific Rim countries, including the Republic of Korea, Japan, and China. Australia and New Zealand are starting to come on board. As Dr. Chang knows, I have a passion about the importance of what information is coming from the Pacific Rim. The contribution that Republic of Korea is placing now is extraordinary. It's one of those things that is not out on the front page of a newspaper, but I can tell you, my friends, it is making a difference. Dr. Chang's leadership is making a difference as a member of the Chairman's Advisory Group that I rely on as far as our interface and our liaison with other organizations. And that's the key thing, going back to my being provocative of how do we do this? We better start communicating horizontally a lot better. Having an idea on a vertical is one thing. Doing it horizontally is going to be important. I will leave you with this picture again. I am very sensitive that the globe has 7.4 billion people. I'm very sensitive to the fact that it is countries like the Republic of Korea, the United States, Canada, Japan, and others, to make sure that what we're developing, the contributions of what this future is, are applicable to areas of the world that are going to count on the standards and recommended practices, whether that's in Central Asia or that's in Africa or that's South America. We have that responsibility. One of the things that I see about the Republic of Korea that I love is leadership. The fact now that the Icheon concept of operations has really put forth an idea. It's great the way that it's laid out. It's innovative. It will be shared. It is being shared. You can go online and find a copy. However, if there's one thing that you can all remember in my words leaving here, we cannot wait for future. We cannot wait for when we're going to start looking about the reduction of separation standards. It has to happen now. There was in 2000, I started thinking about unmanned aircraft vehicles in 1997. That's 27 years ago. And we've come a long way. However, we're on the edge of doing some really good things. At the time that we started talking about unmanned aircraft in the United States, the head of safety at the Federal Aviation Administration said, do no harm. Do not harm the current users of airspace. Leave it the way that it is. But what I have shaped for you all here today is what it is today needs to go in a museum. We need change that's going to affect all air carriers, business, general aviation, military. Supersonics are just a snap away. Boom is looking for their certification. I have no idea when we have that flight that's going to go from London to Seoul on a supersonic, because when that supersonic is coming in the land, it's going to, it can't go around. It's going to be, the trajectory has got to be from point to point, which is a key thing for air traffic management. We don't have global air traffic management requirements point to point. We're going to need to start thinking about that. So let's start thinking about being provocative in a positive way. How to identify the things, to identify where there needs to be change for the benefit of how we're going to have advanced air mobility operating freely and openly with other users of airspace, including helicopters, and do it with a new way of comm navigation surveillance. So with that, I wish you well for your conference. It's been a pure honor to be here with you again. Thank you so much, and I appreciate it. Thank you.